a fierce, steadfast champion for working people, Senator Elizabeth Warren.
It is good to be here on this cold morning, and thank you, Mary B., for the introduction. Also, thank you for your good work at the North Carolina AFL-CIO. You're making a difference in the lives of many, many people, so thank you. Thanks for all you do. Now, I want to begin this morning by thanking Rich Trumka and Damon Silvers. I want to thank you for your leadership on economic issues. I want to thank you for your good counsel, and most of all, I want to thank you for your friendship. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I also want to say thank you to my friends from Massachusetts. Steve Tallman is supposed to be here today. There he is. All right, Lou Mandrini, thank you. You know, I got to say, the guys in Massachusetts made it happen, so thank you very much. You're why I'm here today. All right. I love being here with my labor friends, and I am especially glad to have this chance to be here at the AFL's first ever National Summit on Wages. You follow in the best traditions of American labor movement for more than a century, always fighting for working people, union and non-union. And today you've spotlighted an economic issue that is central to understanding what's happening to people all over this country. Now, I recently read an article in Politico, and it was titled, "Everything is Awesome." It's true. And the article detailed all the good news about the economy. 5% GDP growth in the third quarter of 2014, unemployment under 6% now, a new all-time high for the Dow, low inflation. Despite the headline, the author did recognize that not everything is awesome, but his point has been repeated several times. And on many different statistical measures, the economy has improved, and it's continuing to improve. And I think the president and his team deserve credit for the steps they've taken here. In particular, job growth is a really big deal, and we celebrate it. Good for you, Mr. President. But I've spent most of my career studying what's happening to America's middle class. And I know that these four widely cited statistics give an important snapshot of the health of the overall economy. But the overall picture doesn't tell much about what's happening at the ground level to tens of millions of Americans. Despite these cheery numbers, America's middle class is in deep trouble. Think about it this way. The stock market is soaring, and that's great if you have a pension or you have money in a mutual fund. But if you and your husband or wife are both working full-time with kids in school, and you're among the half or so of all Americans who don't have any money in stocks, how does a booming stock market help you? Corporate profits and GDP are up. But if you work at Walmart and you are paid so little that you still need food stamps to put groceries on the table, what does more money in stockholders' pockets and an uptick in the GDP do for you? Unemployment numbers. You have a part-time job and still can't find full-time work, or if you've just given up because you can't find a job to replace the one you had, you are counted as part of the drop in unemployment. But how much is your economic situation improving? Inflation rates are still low. But if you are young and starting out life with tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt, locked into high interest rates by Congress, unable to find a good job or to save money to buy a house, how are you benefiting from low inflation? A lot of broad national statistics say our economy is getting better, and it's true. Our overall economy is recovering from the terrible crash of 2008. But there have been deep structural changes in the economy, changes that have gone on for more than 30 years, changes that have cut out hardworking middle-class families from sharing in the overall growth. Now, it wasn't always this way. Coming out of the Great Depression, America built a middle class unlike anything on earth. From the 1930s to the late 1970s, as GDP went up, wages went up pretty much across the board. In fact, listen to this number. 90% of all workers, everybody outside the top 10%, got about 70% of all the new income growth. Sure, the richest 10% gobbled up more than their share. They got 30% of the growth. But overall, as the economic pie got bigger, pretty much everyone was getting a little more. In other words, as our economy, as our country got richer, our families got richer. As our families got richer, our country got richer. That is how we built a great middle class in America. But by the 1980s, wages had flattened out while expenses kept going up. The squeeze was terrible. By the early 2000s, families were spending twice as much, adjusted for inflation, on mortgages as they had a generation earlier. They spent more on health insurance, more to send their kids to college. Mom and dad both went to work, but that meant new expenses like childcare, higher taxes, and the cost of a second car. All over the country, people tightened their belts where they could, but it still hasn't been enough to save them. Families have gone deep into debt to pay for college, to cover serious medical problems, or just to try to stay afloat a little while longer. And today's young adults may be the first generation in American history to do worse than their parents did. Remember how, I'm just telling you, up until 1980, from 1935 to 1980, 90% of the people, all people, middle class, working folks, the poor, they got about 70% of all the new income that was created in this economy, and the top 10% took the rest. Well, since 1980, guess how much of the growth in income over the last 32 years, how much of the growth in income did the 90% get? Zero. None. Nothing. In fact, it is worse than that. The average family, not in the top 10%, makes less money today than they were making a generation ago. So who got all of the increase in income over the last 32 years? 100% of it went to the top 10%. All of the new money earned in this economy over the past generation, all of that growth in GDP went to the top. All of it. That is a huge structural change in this country. And when I look at the data here, and this includes years of research that I conducted myself, I see the evidence everywhere of the pounding that working people are taking. Instead of building an economy for all Americans, for the past generation, this country has grown an economy that works for some Americans. For tens of millions of working families who are the backbone of this country, this economy isn't working. These families are working harder than ever, but they can't get ahead. Opportunity is slipping away. Many feel like the game is rigged against them, and they are right. The game is rigged against them. Since the 1980s, too many people running this country have followed one form or another of supply-side or trickle-down economic theory, and many in Washington today still support it. When all the varnish is removed, trickle-down just means helping the biggest corporations and the richest people in this country and claiming that those big corporations and rich people could be counted on to create an economy that would work for everyone else. Now, no surprise, trickle-down was popular with big corporations and their lobbyists, but it never really made much sense. George Bush Sr. called it voodoo economics, you remember that? And he was right. But let's call it for what it is. Trickle-down was nothing more than the politics of helping the rich and powerful get richer and more powerful. And it cut the legs out from underneath America's middle class. Trickle-down policies are actually pretty simple. First, fire the cops. Not the cops on Main Street, the cops on Wall Street. Pretty much the whole Republican Party, and if we're going to be honest, too many Democrats, have talked about the evils of big government and called for deregulation. And it all sounded good. But what it was really about was tying the hands of regulators and turning loose big banks and giant international corporations to do whatever they wanted to do. Turning them loose to rig the market and reduce competition. Turning them loose to outsource more jobs. Turning them loose to load up on more risks and then hide behind taxpayer guarantees. Turning them loose to sell more mortgages and more credit cards that cheated American families. In short, turning them loose to do whatever juiced short-term profits, even if it came at the expense of working families. Now, trickle-down had a second part to it, and that is cut taxes for those at the top. Cut them when times are good, cut them when times are bad. And when that meant there was less money for road repairs, less money for medical research, and less money for schools, and that our government would need to squeeze kids on student loans, trickle-down advocates said, so be it. And look at the results. The top 10% got all the growth in income over the past 30 years, all of it, and the economy stopped working for everyone else. The trickle-down experiment that began in the Reagan years failed America's middle class. Sure, the rich are doing great, giant corporations are doing great, lobbyists are doing great, but we need an economy where everyone else has a shot to do great. The world has changed beneath the feet of America's working families. Powerful forces like globalization and technology are creating seismic shifts that are disrupting our economy, altering employment patterns, and putting new stresses on old structures. Those changes could create new opportunities, or they could sweep away the last vestiges of economic security for 90% of American workers. Those changes demand new and different economic policies from our federal government. But too many politicians have just looked the other way. Instead of running government to expand opportunity for 90% of Americans and to shore up security in an increasingly uncertain world, instead of rethinking economic policy to deal with tough new realities, for more than 30 years, Washington has far too often advanced policies that hammer America's middle class even harder. Look at the choices Washington has made, the choices that have left America's working families in a deep hole, the choice to leash up the financial cops, the choice in a recession to bail out the biggest banks with no strings attached while families suffered, the choice to starve our schools and burden our kids with billions of dollars in student loan debt while cutting taxes for billionaires, the choice to spend your tax dollars to subsidize big oil instead of putting that money into rebuilding our roads and bridges and power grids, the choice to look the other way when employers quit paying overtime, reclassified workers as independent contractors, and just plain old stole people's wages. You bet. And the choice to sign trade pacts and tax deals that let subsidized manufacturers around the globe sell here in America, while good American jobs got shipped overseas. For more than 30 years, too many politicians in Washington have made deliberate choices that favored those with money and power. And the consequence is that instead of an economy that works well for everyone, America now has an economy that works well for about 10% of the people. It wasn't always this way, and it doesn't have to be this way. We can make new choices. We can make different choices, choices that put working people first, choices that aim toward a better future for our children, choices that reflect our deepest values. This is up to us. And one way to make those choices is to talk openly and honestly and directly about work, about how we value work, and we value those who do the work. We need to talk about what we believe. We believe that no one should work full-time and still live in poverty, and that means raising the minimum wage. We believe that workers have a right to come together, to bargain together, and to rebuild America's middle class. We believe in enforcing labor laws so that workers get overtime pay and pensions are fully funded. We believe in that. We believe in equal pay for equal work. And we believe that after a lifetime of work, a person is entitled to retire with dignity. And that means protecting Social Security, protecting Medicare, and protecting our pensions. We don't make things better for workers if we don't get out and talk about work. But we also need to talk about jobs, about how we create jobs here in America. We need to talk about how we build a future. And let's make it clear. We believe in making investments in roads and bridges and power grids, in education, in research, investments that create good jobs in the short run and help us build new opportunities in the long run. We believe in that. And we believe in paying for them, not with magical accounting scams that pretend to cut taxes and raise revenues, but with real, honest-to-goodness changes that make sure that everyone, including corporations, pays a fair share to build that future for all of us. And let's get ready for what's coming. We believe in trade policies and tax codes that will strengthen our economy, that will raise our standard of living, that will create American jobs, because we will never give up on these three words, made in America. We believe in that. You bet. We need to talk about jobs. We need to talk about work. We need to talk about one thing more, and that is politics. If we are ever going to unrig the system, then we need to make some important political changes. And let me give you a place where we should start. We know that democracy does not work when congressmen and regulators bow down to Wall Street's political power. And that means it's time to break up the Wall Street banks and remind politicians they don't work for the big banks, they work for us. That's what it's time for. Do that. Changes like this aren't easy, but we know they are possible. We know they are possible because we have seen David beat Goliath. We have seen the lobbyists lose. We have seen it throughout our history. We saw it when we fought for and won the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. We did that, the people in this room. We saw it when we passed health care reform. We saw it when President Obama took important steps to reform our immigration system through executive order just a few weeks ago. Change is hard, but change is possible. That's what we know. This is personal for me. When I was 12, my three big brothers were all off in the military. My mom was 50 years old, a stay-at-home mom, and my daddy had a heart attack, and it turned our little family upside down. The bills piled up, we lost the family station wagon, we came about that close to losing our home. And I remember the day when my mother, scared, crying, pulled her best dress out of the closet, put it on, put on her high heels, and walked to the Sears to get a minimum wage job. That minimum wage job was enough back then to support a family of three. And that minimum wage job meant save our home, save our family. My daddy ended up as a maintenance man. My mom kept working at Sears. I graduated from a commuter college that cost $50 a semester. And I ended up in the United States Senate. I tell that story because I believe. I tell that story because, sure, I work hard, but I grew up in an America that was investing in its kids, an America that was building a future. I believe in that America. I believe in what we can do. I believe in the future we can build. And I'll tell you this, I'm going to fight for that America. And if we fight together, that's the America we will build together. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you.